be tried as an adult, and it was granted because, thank you. Her public defenders had presented evidence from a psychiatrist who had testified that the increase of Prozac in the weeks prior to the murder could have been a, quote, major contributing factor, but the theory was rejected. The prosecution psychiatrist had insisted that there was no scientifically proven correlation to Prozac affecting increased aggression, especially in homicidal feelings.
I don't really know anything about medicine. It's hard enough for adults to find the right medication to be on.
The state had charged Alyssa with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. At the hearing, the court heard about the mental state and circumstances surrounding the murder. The defense had also filed a motion to suppress her confession, as they felt as though the interrogation questions were not allowed under Missouri law because she was a juvenile. The confession was then thrown out. During the trial, she exhibited many signs of depression and possible borderline symptoms and was kept under suicide watch. Her fingernails were clipped often after attempts to cut herself with them and to dig into her wrist to try to kill herself.
I was talking to Angie, who actually is a hop and a skip away from being a psychiatrist. We had this whole conversation about borderline personality disorder. And she was saying that years ago, somebody's a cutter, automatically they were like, okay, well, you're borderline. But now we realize that borderline is very specific.
Her lawyer had filed a notion to have her taken to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. And while her case was being tried, another case in the U.S. Supreme Court was likely to rule mandatory life sentence without parole was unconstitutional for juveniles.
For minors, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which then prompted the prosecution to amend a charge to second-degree murder, which was reactionary to make sure that she went away for something.
Yeah.
Her case was delayed until January 10th, 2012, so a little bit over 2 years since, obviously she murdered a really cute, adorable little human.
And was potentially going to kill more.
Yes.
Adorable, tiny humans.
That was definitely brought up that she would have continued forward because of the way that she executed it. They had noted that if she were to be released, that more likely than not, she would not only repeat offend, but definitely continue to hone her craft to be more.
I mean, she even, in her writings said how amazing it felt.
Exactly. Alyssa had reached the age of 18 by the time of her trial starting again in 2012. She had retracted her not guilty plea to plead guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action due to a plea deal that would waive her the rights to a jury trial. Her plea was entered with the provision that she understood and acknowledged that she would be entering a, quote, blind plea, meaning that the judge was not bound to an agreed-upon sentence and that she couldn't withdraw a guilty plea at the hearing. During this hearing, she had showed the emotion that she fought to reveal in the previous court appearances. She broke down several times, giving emotional testimonies to Elizabeth's family. Quote, I know words can never be enough, and they can never adequately describe how horribly I feel for all of this. Really?
She's also been marinating in it now for a couple years, right?
Yes, and now she's in jail, and now she's realizing that actions have a consequence, and maybe when you write things like, it's amazing, with an A and an H.
I knew that that's exactly how it was spelled.
Oh, yes, of course.
When you started telling me the story, I instantly was just back in my freshman year in high school, just like with my flippy hair.
Elizabeth's family wept, and Alyssa's grandparents left the courtroom. Before the sentencing was handed down the next day, Elizabeth's grandmother had yelled, quote, I think Alyssa should get out of jail the same day that Elizabeth gets out of the grave. I'm not mad at that grandma.
I'm not mad at that grandma either.
She was decided to have made the plea under no duress and with full knowledge of an understanding of what it entailed. Before her sentence was handed down, Elizabeth's family made passionate pleas to impose the maximum sentence. Alyssa also made a statement, quote, I just want to say I'm sorry for what happened. I'm so sorry. I cannot even understand what you guys are going through. I'm sorry for that. If I could give my life to get her back, I would. But you can't because you killed her.
Yep, that's pretty much where my head went.
Yeah. None of Elizabeth's family had believed her. Elizabeth's sister had even stated that, quote, she was being fed what to say to us from her attorney, so none of it was real.
Yeah, okay.
On February 8th, 2012, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole plus 30 additional years for the armed criminal action.
Oh, good.
In order to qualify for probation, she would have to spend at least 35 years in prison. After Alyssa was put in jail, Patty Price, Elizabeth's mother, had filed a lawsuit and a wrongful death suit against her siblings, and her grandparents, which I'm not into that. Her grandparents weren't responsible. Her siblings, who were younger than her, it was her fault.
How do you file a lawsuit against somebody who's, 6 years old? Like, that's crazy.
Like, they weren't responsible. Patty was awarded $400,000 in a settlement. She also sued to ensure that Alyssa cannot profit from the crime. No interviews, no movies or books. Alyssa is also required to notify Patty Price if she receives compensation for any publicity about the case. I think that's amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah. You cannot make money on my daughter's wrongful death. Absolutely not. How dare you?
So Alyssa's grandmother can also not profit off of it, correct?
I don't think anyone can. There was someone that made a movie about it, and he specifically had said he felt some sort of kinship. In looking for her social media, I found a bunch of dummy social medias, of course.
As you do.
Yeah, and people that are acting as her, one of which was like, well, I do get internet sometimes, so fuck off, haters. The thing is, too, there was a concern of her being put into, they didn't have a juvenile facility for her, for people that were being tried as an adult. Yeah. So they were concerned that she would go into prison, and people that were campaigning for her release were campaigning specifically because of her age, and with the possibility of her being put into a situation that she couldn't fathom when she's a child. Totally understood. But you killed someone. But with these dummy sites that I was looking at, including a YouTube where you can still find some of her videos copied from people that had saved them to their laptops or whatever and then re-uploaded.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So it's the one with her brothers touching the electric fence, and there's a number of other ones. But there's a Twitter right now that's super active that's posting basically all of her mugshots and then pretending to post as her. And then there's also Facebook. And both of them have supposedly her, which it isn't, posting things like, yeah, I make mistakes, okay? And then people underneath are like, yeah, everyone makes a mistake. Or one of her friends from her childhood had posted something on her fake Facebook that, I was super good friends with her. If it's really you, let me know how many pages was the letter I sent you, da-da-da. And then a number of other people saying basically how cute she was, which all of these people are adults and are saying this 15-year-old girl is cute. And also she's a murderer.
It's so fucked up and gross.
Yeah, check yourself, it's gross.
Ew.
Alyssa would later file an application for transfer, and that was denied. She also filed an appeal citing ineffective assistance because she maintains that her counsel had pressured her to enter a plea prior to the Supreme Court decision being completely finalized. She also noted that she didn't fully understand, due to the failure of counsel, the effect of Miller versus Alabama, which is what actually changed the mandatory sentence for juveniles who committed murder. Mm-hmm. Prior to pleading guilty, the judge said, fuck you. The court decided that she had sufficient representation. Her request was denied.
They make that very clear when you go into a courtroom.
And the second, when she actually went to trial and she entered her plea, she was over the age of 18.
Yeah, I mean...
And she had 2 years to think about what this meant.
So it's just like very hard once you do something to undo it in the court system.
Yes, exactly, because she had already agreed that she knew that when she entered her plea that she could not retract it any longer.
Boom, boom, boom. Right there. Yes.
Cole County prosecutor Mark Richardson had stated that Alyssa had committed, quote, an adult-like crime and received an adult-like punishment.
Yeah, as she should.
He did say it was appropriate, and, quote, just because the sentencing hearing went badly for her in terms of more years than maybe she expected, that's not a reason for a judge to allow a defendant to withdraw their plea. Agreed. You knew what you were doing. You planned it out. You had all the time in the world to turn back. You chose not to. Even when she started to strangle her and she was facing her, even then, she had the time to turn back. She could have been like, cool, this wasn't as I was expecting.
She had the time to not do it. I mean, she had a lot of time while she was digging those 2 graves.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly. Or telling her sister to go play with this other girl and bring her over, and walking her through the woods, telling her she had a present for her. There's too much. You knew what you were doing. I don't care what kind of person that you thought you were at the time. You did it. You laughed about it later. Now you get to face the consequences, and no one's feeling sorry for you.
I feel bad for everybody in both of those families.
Yeah. Like, it's horrifying. Yeah. Her mother, it's fucking heartbreaking. It is so heartbreaking, because there's...
Elizabeth's mother?
Elizabeth's mother.
Oh, God. I mean, I can imagine.
She has a Facebook that's in memory of her daughter. And she posts on every single holiday. She posts on her birthday, and she posts on the day where she was taken from her. It's horrifyingly upsetting. I did actually take a quote from it, but it legit makes me misty, and I can't I can't fucking handle it. Everything that she puts on there is basically like, you know, I know you're in heaven and you're doing really great now. It really sucks that I can't hear your laugh. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Everything is ended with love, mama, or I wish I could just hear your voice again. It's very upsetting.
Yeah.
And rightfully upsetting.
Yeah. Bitch, now you got me, Misty. Fuck you.
Yeah, it's not great. And this is me vaguely talking about it. Reading them last night, I was like, maybe I cannot read this anymore.
Yeah, that's, you know what, though? It gets rough sometimes. You get
Awful.
knee deep into it, especially when something happens to kids. It's extra hard.
Yeah, she was murdered a little bit less than 2 months before her 10th birthday. And by now she'd be almost 20. So she'd be heading off to college, which her mother references again on her memorial site. You know, you should be finishing your senior year, having your homecoming dance, your prom. You should be dating people. You should be going to football games and having a really great experience. It should be your senior year. And instead of that, she obviously isn't. Elizabeth Olten's funeral was a sea of pink, which was her favorite color, of course. 9-year-old girl, worn by her friends and family in her honor. Her love for horses was also present as she was brought by a horse-drawn carriage to the cemetery. There's a lot of references to her being presented like a princess.
Ugh. Oh my God, my eyes hurt. What is this?
I know.
What is this feeling? I hate it. Get back in there.
So I was yelling at his tears.
That was awful. And you were right. That was very sad.
Remarkably upsetting.
But, you know, I can't believe that I didn't hear anything about that.
I looked it up to see how many podcasts had done it, just because you know, that's what I do. And I try to do ones that are lesser known.
Yeah.
And Sword and Scale had done it, but I don't remember listening to it. So I'm not sure if Sword and Scale had done it on one of their regular episodes or if they had done it on one of the episodes for their Patreon members. Mm-hmm. It's awful.
So can we please get off of my sad topic of a little sweet baby?
Yeah, we're going to get off of that topic. We are going to talk about something cool. It's something I know for a fact that you know about. A lot of people that listen to the show probably know about it too. But I think it's really fun and interesting. So I've been kind of wanting to cover it for a while. We're going to talk about Greyfriars Kirkyard.
Okay.
Which is really exciting, right?
It was pretty. I almost did it, and then I realized how popular it was, and then I backed away from it.
I was a little deterred, but I was like, you know what, baby girl? You live once. So Greyfriars Kirkyard is the graveyard surrounding Greyfriars Kirk in Edinburgh, Scotland. Burials have been taking place there since the late 16th century, and a number of notable Edinburgh residents have been buried in Greyfriars. Greyfriars, by the way, takes its name from the Franciscan friary on the site, which was dissolved in 1559. The friars there, by the way, wore gray robes. So that's why it is Greyfriars. And the churchyard was founded in 1561. Mm-hmm. So one of the more popular associations with Greyfriars is Greyfriars Bobby, which it's so adorable. Greyfriars Bobby is the loyal dog who guarded his master's grave and wouldn't leave him after he was buried. And like, I just, oh my God, girl, I can't even with it.
Well, you did send me a text like, dog dad forever.
I mean, because it was 13 years or something after his owner had died and was buried in Greyfriars, that dog became real famous throughout Edinburgh because everybody just knew him as the dog that would not leave his deceased master's grave. And sometimes he would leave the cemetery and he would go to a cafe and he would beg for scraps and everybody would feed him. And then I even was listening to at one point it became necessary that every dog in Edinburgh had to have a license for it. Otherwise, they would basically put the dog down. Mm. But because Greyfriars Bobby was so loved by everybody, the crown paid for the license for the dog so that it could just be itself and exist, right? So cute. Bobby's headstone is located at the entrance to the kirkyard, and it was erected by the Dog Aid Society in 1981. It marks his actual burial place in an unconsecrated patch of the kirkyard, and the dog's statue is located opposite of the graveyard's gate. The grave of Bobby's master, Edinburgh police officer John Gray, where the dog famously slept for 13 years, lies on the eastern path in the cemetery, some 30 meters north of the entrance, and his stone is more modern as the grave had originally been unmarked. Actually, Bobby's headstone and John's headstone, I feel like they look pretty similar. So there are enclosed vaults that are mainly found on the south edge of the graveyard, and in the Covenanters' prison, these vaults either have solid stone walls or iron railings and were created to keep grave robbers out, which had become a problem in the 18th century. Greyfriars also has 2 low ironwork cages called mort safes. They were leased and protected bodies for